So after Chanticleer's long, drastic speech about how he's gonna die and his dream is prophetic, aren't I so amazing? He then forgets all of that because of the words of a woman, his wife, and just like that, he goes about his business in the barnyard, and he is like a king. He clasps Pertolote. He couples with her, and it seems as if his dream and his impending doom is out of his mind. And there's that implication there with things going back to the status quo, things going back to the way that they've always been, is that once again, Chanticleer is on top of this wheel, this fortune wheel, enjoying the blissful married state, enjoying the spoils of his kingdom. And then while he is, you know, hanging out with Pertolote and snuggling up with her and doing all of the things that, married couples do, we get this interruption from the priest, the nun's priest. And he says, the joyful time is no more. Chanticleer's fortune is about to change. And this is where he kind of interjects himself with a warning, and he says, now let every wise man listen. And this kind of goes, I mean, we've seen this kind of motif time and time again throughout the last 3 weeks, where there is this kind of narrative warning. Listen, let me show you, pay attention. This is what I'm about to say something important. Get the wax out of your ears, kind of deal. And he swears by Lancelot of the Lake, the one that women love. And this reference to Lancelot is important because it's a reference, first and foremost, it's a reference to King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table, those Arthurian romances that the audience would have been familiar with, those popular tales. And it's also important, as we'll see next week when we get into Le Morte d'Arthur, Lancelot, his downfall, his failure, is a result of his attraction to and the distraction of his kind of love for Guinevere. And it's this preoccupation, this desire, this devotion to the king's wife and this woman that basically destroys the kingdom of Camelot. The wheel of the order is all, the hierarchy is whacked out of order, and chaos ensues, and Camelot can't survive. So by alluding to Lancelot, there is that implication there that kind of ties in to all of the hidden, not so hidden, satire of these courtly, this idea of courtly love, and this comment on the medieval perception of women, the medieval perception of order, the medieval perception of chivalry, that Chaucer is not so gently poking fun at. And so we get this interjection by the priest tale saying, hey, listen up, this is important. And this is when we are introduced to the fox. And the fox has various names, and depending on the translation or the version of the story that you're reading, sometimes he's referred to as Reynard the fox, or Don Russell the fox. But essentially, he's the fox, and we are introduced to him. And he is that proverbial fox in the hen house. And just like the fox that were described in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, we have this sly, unrighteous, mischievous animal who lays quietly and waits. He is divinely sent, and we know that, we know all along that this fox is going to appear, and Chanticleer should know that the fox should appear. And it kind of goes back to in some ways that his name, he sings clear, but is he singing clear? um he should have this clarity because he's been given this foresight, yet because of um Perlote, he has been kind of blinded and confused to what he knows about his ultimate fate. So, anyways, I digress. He is divinely sent, and he is called a false murderer, or not, and not in the sense that the murder is false, but he is deceitful. He is a liar. Um, he is deceptive. He is also called Iscariot, which of course is a reference to Judas in the Bible, the betrayer of Christ, the false disciple. And this idea of fate and fortune. So essentially, the fox is equated with the crucifixion and the betrayal of Jesus and the downfall of Troy. And again, we have those like really awkward blending of this literary authority and this scriptural biblical authority that is, it's kind of out of place that they are both juxtaposed side by side, because one is of extreme importance specifically to someone like the priest and the church and the Catholic faith, and the other is by comparison trivial. So then we get this interesting kind of digression, or it seems as if it is a digression, and I'm calling this the kind of predestination debate. And the nun's priest really kind of flexes his mental muscles here by showing that he is familiar with the kind of philosophical, secular debates of the time, this idea of predestination. And essentially it's like, I want to say it's Boethius and Augustine about this kind of concept of predestination, or this idea of free will. And essentially it is, I'm going to break it down a little bit so we can kind of understand this a little bit more, so, or it makes it more easily digestible. So essentially, God tells Chanticleer about the fox. Chanticleer is given divine knowledge. He has, and think back to that kind of great chain of being and this idea of providence and design and all that kind of thing. God tells Chanticleer about the fox. He has this knowledge, but God also grants us free will to do as we please. We have a choice of how we decide to act. And there's this kind of concept that knowledge is not a necessary cause of man's actions. So it begs the question, or poses the question, of how dreams may or may not provide foreknowledge, with the question of how that foreknowledge, if we get it, affects the freedom of our actions. So essentially it boils down to this: just because I know something is going to happen, or I can assume something is going to happen, Is that enough to change the way I behave? Or is that enough to change my actions? So, for example, I know that if I drink myself silly, I am going to have a hangover. However, if it's my 21st birthday and I have this divine knowledge that I will have a hangover if I drink too much, is that going to prevent me from doing so? Probably not. I'm going to do it anyway. It is my 21st birthday. So it's that idea of just because we know something doesn't prevent our ability to act freely. I hope that makes sense. But essentially, it what it boils down to is that Chanticleer knows that the fox is dangerous, but because he has this kind of free will and he is flattered by the fox to sing, he does so. I mean, he forgets that kind of knowledge and acts um, acts in a way that he is going to end up getting him in trouble. So, but this kind of philosophical debate, if you don't get it, and some of Chaucer's readership and some of the pilgrims on the pilgrimage aren't going to get what he's saying. So in some ways, this is the priest's arrogance coming through. He says, and he reminds us that this is not a story of philosophical debate. That is not the point of my tale. This is not a story about fate or free will or dreams. It's about a rooster. And it's about a rooster. And if we think about this in terms of it being about a rooster, these things are silly to consider because he's an animal. And animals act on animal instinct, not by free will or anything like that. But he also reminds us that it is about a rooster. And not only is it about a rooster, it is about one who takes his wife's counsel to his sorrow. And so he kind of continues his comments about women that tie back to his mistranslation about women being men's joy or women being man's downfall. And he basically says that women's advice or the pieces of advice that we get from women are often fatal. And then notice the narrative distance he puts between himself and his words. He says, I don't know who I might offend. I said this in sport. If I insult women's advice, read what others say. These are the Cox words. These are Chanticleer's words, not mine. I can't imagine any harm by any woman. So essentially, he's saying, I'm just kidding. But if you don't get it, this is what the rooster says. I'm not saying this. The rooster is saying that women's advice is bad. I'm saying I can't imagine a woman doing that kind of harm. Why does he do that? And I think the answer lies with who he's traveling with. He is traveling with a woman. One, he is hierarchically submissive to and beneath on that social ladder. He depends on the good favor of the prioress, of the woman, to kind of survive. So he's kind of got to do a little backtrack dance and separate himself from this potentially alienating commentary. So just so, Chanticleer and the fox meet at last, and it's the high point of this tragedy, where we have this kind of culmination of the end of things. And basically, I mean, look at how we know that Chanticleer should steer clear of the fox, but notice how the fox is able to get close to Chanticleer. He appeals to his pride, his arrogance, and we know that Chanticleer is this very proud rooster. He says, "Your voice is so beautiful. I only came to hear you sing. Let me listen to your beautiful voice." And he Chanticleer is so flattered by this. He's so full of his own self-importance that he can't detect the treachery. And just like that, Chanticleer is grabbed by the neck and dragged towards the woods. And this high tragedy culminates in a comparison with the this kind of comparison between the events of the Aeneid. Chanticleer's capture is compared to the expulsion of man from Eden, the betrayal of Christ, the crucifixion, the fatal wounding of Richard the First, the death of an actual king. So essentially, I mean, like things, the barnyard turns into chaos. People are running around, the chickens are clucking, everything is topsy turvy because the king has essentially been dethroned. He has been, I mean, it's kind of like regicide in a way, and that kind of idea that goes back to the killing of Richard the First, the death of the king of the Lion Heart, and there's all of this kind of really fascinating literary commentary, religious commentary, political commentary, all of that that suggests that when you take the top, when the top of the order, when the top of the ladder crumbles, everything else turns to crap. And the king of the barnyard, the fall of the king, it leads to the collapse of order itself. And this chaos kind of comes to an end with Chanticleer's escape. And we have again this kind of reversal of fortune where the fox is outfoxed. Chanticleer offers to help the fox get away from the widow, and he says, you know, just tell them how, just brag, boast about how great you are for getting away. And as soon as the fox opens his mouth, Chanticleer is able to escape and fly into a tree. And we have essentially, after Chanticleer's escape, these three morals that I'm going to very briefly talk about in the next video. So stay tuned.